The neoconservatism of such avatars of the war party as Irving Kristol is, quote, merely a recycled model of the old liberal politics that led to the decline and fall of a Democratic Party in the 1960s, a fiscally irresponsible, ever-expanding federal government presided over by an imperial executive imbued with a messianic view of America's right to democratize the heathen, or as Irving's neocon son William, editor of the Weekly Standard, prefers, our moral duty to actively pursue policies leading to Woodrow Wilson's dream of a benevolent global hegemony. Translated from a neocon, this means, today we own Washington, tomorrow the world, unquote. And he's not even a speaker at this conference. That's amazing. The ultranationalists are closely aligned with the second component of the war party, which is the military-industrial national security complex. It is, after all, the money-making branch of the war party, the treasury, as it were, that funds the rest of the apparatus. Pro-war think tanks like the American Enterprise Institute, the Center for Security Policy, and other neocon outfits get a great deal of their money from those who profit from our foreign policy of relentless aggression and from the burgeoning 9/11 industry. And you can see that this is part of the personal style of many of the most prominent warmongers, notably, for example, Richard Pearl, whose business dealings and ideological concerns have always worked in perfect harmony, and Rudy Giuliani, whose company, Giuliani Associates, has a very dubious record and has made major profits in this area. But this is just the icing on the cake. The real meat and potatoes of the military industrialists is in the constant demands by both parties to build an ever bigger U.S. military machine, one that has a bigger budget than the top 30 military budgets on the planet combined. Chalmers Johnson, in his brilliant trilogy on the origins and development of American militarism, has described this as, quote, an empire of bases. And he does a great job of explaining how it works politically and economically. Suffice to say here that this base-building, weapons-making, extravagantly expensive apparatus is, of course, all funded out of the U.S. Treasury. And its rapid expansion, with almost no opposition in the U.S. Congress, serves the class interests of a rising sector of the elites, which derives its income directly or indirectly from administering, maintaining, and expanding America's overseas empire. In considering the makeup of the war party circa 2007, we have to examine the key role played by its third component, which is the Israel lobby. Referring back to Lindbergh's speech, the first thing to be said is that Israel has taken the place of Britain as the most powerful foreign interest goading us into war. As professors John J. Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt put it in their taboo-busting study of the Israel lobby and U.S. foreign policy, quote, the U.S. national interest should be the primary object of American foreign policy. For the past several decades, however, and especially since the Six-Day War in 1967, the centerpiece of U.S. Middle East policy has been its relationship to Israel. The combination of unwavering U.S. support for Israel and the related effort to spread democracy throughout the region has inflamed Arab and Islamic opinion and jeopardized U.S. security. This situation has no equal in American political history. Why has the United States been willing to set aside its own security in order to advance the interests of another state, end quote. Well, Mearsheimer and Walt spend the rest of their 5,000-word essay answering this question, which boils down to the very effective tactic of smearing any and all opposition as anti-Semitic, or in the Stalinesque phrase of Ryan Sager, the alleged libertarian who now supports Rudolph Giuliani, objectively anti-Semitic. By conflating the government of the State of Israel with all Jews everywhere, ideologues of Sager's ilk try to control the terms of a debate and thus keep a lid on any inquiry into how and why U.S. foreign policy has become so distorted. The lobby's record of uninterrupted victories is due in no small part to their hegemonic grip on the policymaking process. Congress, in the view of Mearsheimer and Walt, is practically Israeli-occupied territory, to borrow a trenchant phrase from Pat Buchanan. Quote, the bottom line is that AIPAC, which is a de facto agent of a foreign government, has a stranglehold on the U.S. Congress. Open debate about U.S. policy towards Israel does not occur there, end quote. Mearsheimer and Walt also detail the efforts of the pro-Israel lobby to gin up a war with Iraq, and furthermore document the current attempt to replicate their success in the case of Iran. And while the lobby's efforts alone would not have been enough to lure us into the Iraqi quagmire, without the lobby, we almost certainly would have refrained from launching that futile crusade. While the efforts to get us involved in Iraq were relatively low-key, the campaign to target Iran as the next candidate for US-sponsored regime change is the occasion for the lobby to brazenly flex its political muscles. One example, a provision in the recently passed Iraq War funding bill that would have required the president to come to Congress before attacking Iran was stripped from the final version at the lobby's insistence by the Democrats, of course, and Nancy Pelosi, my congresswoman. Like the British in the run-up to US involvement in World War II, the Israelis have set up an extensive propaganda and covert action operation in the States, a network that has a hand in policing the media, academia, and the two major political parties to make sure that Israel's interests are served, and more than that, to ensure that no substantive debate over the premises of American foreign policy ever takes place. This network has penetrated not only the top echelons of the US government and its policymaking apparatus, but also the opinion-making elite networks represented by the major think tanks and the major media outlets, which are under tremendous pressure to conform to the lobby's party line. In much the same way as the Soviet Union was pretty much exempt from too much scrutiny or criticism by the major media when we were allies with Uncle Joe Stalin in World War II, so today Israel enjoys the same immunity in the name of an unspoken but ruthlessly enforced form of political correctness. The entire neoconservative Bushian project of exporting democracy to the Middle East, starting but not ending with Iraq, was launched to advance Israeli interests in the region. All the palaver about democracy has been merely a thin veneer of ideological cover for a ruthlessly executed geopolitical ploy to take the pressure off of Israel, beleaguered as it is by hostile forces on every side, and a demographic problem, by the way, that only gets worse as time goes on. The clean break policy paper prepared for then Prime Minister and probably future Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by a number of US policymakers, including Richard Pearl and former Pentagon policy honcho Douglas Feith, details the rationale behind regime change in Iraq as a way to neutralize Syria, ensure Israeli domination of Lebanon, and pave the way for an open confrontation with Iran. With Netanyahu primed to succeed Ehud Olmert as the next Israeli prime minister, he will take office with nearly every element of the clean break plan either accomplished or ready to be implemented.